The drama surrounding the WNBA has reached a point where the league can no longer pretend its internal fractures are mere disagreements. What began as murmurs about revenue distribution and charter flights has evolved into a full-scale uprising over respect, leadership, and the very future of women's basketball. The moment Adam Silver stepped in front of the cameras and acknowledged that the WNBA is dealing with undeniable relationship problems between its players and leadership, the facade of unity cracked. This was not a small admission. This was the commissioner of the NBA, the overseeing body, publicly confirming what players had been screaming behind the scenes for months. A league already standing on unstable ground was suddenly exposed in the harshest light. Silver's comments did more than acknowledge tension. They signaled that something deep within the WNBA structure had fractured far beyond normal labor negotiations. These were not the standard disputes over contract percentages or incremental pay raises. These were wounds that cut into trust, communication, and respect. The players were not just frustrated. They felt dismissed. They felt unheard. They felt disrespected by the very people responsible for guiding the league into its next era of growth. When Silver referenced relationship issues, he was admitting what insiders already knew. The players did not believe in the league's leadership anymore. And when belief collapses, everything else begins to crumble around it. The turning point came when Nafisa Collier delivered her explosive statement at the end of Minnesota's season. She did not mince words or soften her concerns. She did not hide behind vague frustrations or corporate politeness. She described the WNBA's leadership as the worst in the world and backed it with examples that sent shockwaves through locker rooms around the league. For a star player to speak that bluntly in the middle of collective bargaining negotiations instantly pushed the dispute from a quiet internal battle to a public crisis. Her allegations about dismissive comments from Commissioner Kathy Engelbert painted a disturbing picture of a league that had lost touch with its players and lost sight of its values. The ripple effect was immediate. Players across teams and fan bases began to rally behind Collier, sharing the same frustrations. What made the moment even more powerful was that it came during the WNBA Finals, a golden opportunity for the league to capitalize on rising momentum. Instead of celebrating the basketball, the story dominating headlines was the growing disconnect between players and league officials. And when Caitlin Clark was asked about Collier's comments, her response added fuel to the fire. She did not dismiss them. She supported them. She emphasized the need for leadership capable of stewarding the league into the future. But the most telling part was her admission that Engelbert had not contacted her after the allegations. Silence at a moment like that is not neutrality. It is negligence. When the league's biggest star does not receive so much as a phone call to clarify, reassure, or communicate, it becomes painfully clear that something is fundamentally broken. The players felt abandoned. They felt undervalued. They felt like the league was growing because of their sacrifices yet refusing to acknowledge the weight they carried. And to make matters worse, other stars began to pile on. Aya Wilson expressed disgust over Engelbert's alleged remarks. Angel Reese added her support. Sophie Cunningham openly questioned whether the people in power even understood basketball. This was no longer a small group of frustrated athletes. This was a rebellion. The tension had been building for years. Players had long complained about inconsistent officiating, brutal travel conditions, constant commercial flights, low salaries, and a lack of investment in facilities. But the arrival of Caitlin Clark intensified everything. Her impact was undeniable. She drove record ratings, packed arenas, revived merchandise sales, and pushed the league into mainstream conversations. Yet even as she carried this weight, she became the target of jealousy and hostility from veterans who felt threatened by the attention she attracted. Fans watched her get hammered on the court without whistle protection. They watched veterans downplay her significance. They watched the league remain silent while she absorbed repeated blows. The disconnect between leadership and players only widened. This was the context when Adam Silver stepped in. Speaking with measured urgency, he acknowledged that repairing relationships must become a priority if the league hopes to avoid disaster. But the players were skeptical. They pointed to years of promises that never materialized. They pointed to the vast gap between the league's explosive growth and their own compensation. They pointed to a revenue split where players receive only 9.3% of league income. They pointed to the NBA's 50% player share and simply asked why a league preaching progress refused to share the prosperity its players created. They were not asking to be paid like NBA stars. They were asking for a fair percentage of what they themselves were generating. Meanwhile, the WNBA attempted to soften the situation by highlighting salary increases in the proposed deal, with maximum contracts potentially reaching $850,000. But the players saw through it. This was not just about bigger checks. It was about dignity. It was about work conditions. It was about a league that wanted to expand from 12 to 18 teams but refused to offer charter flights for all franchises. It was about leadership that seemed more interested in corporate growth than in the humans driving that growth. The timing made everything more urgent. The WNBA had just landed a historic multi-billion-dollar media rights deal that could redefine the league's future. Franchises nearly tripled in value. Attendance soared. Viewership surged. But all of that momentum was anchored by the players themselves. And if those players did not feel valued, respected, or protected, the entire structure risked collapsing beneath the weight of its own neglect. Adam Silver insisted that a deal would get done. But behind the scenes, executives whispered fears of a work stoppage. They feared losing the momentum they had waited 27 years to achieve. They feared the possibility that the league might implode at the very moment it finally began to grow. And they feared something even darker, that players, empowered by idolization and frustrated by disrespect, might start looking elsewhere. The WNBA is standing on the edge of its most defining moment. Its future will not be determined solely by contracts or press releases. It will be determined by whether leadership can finally listen, whether players can finally trust, whether the league can finally recognize that growth is meaningless without respect at its core. The next few weeks will determine whether the WNBA rises into its golden era or fractures under the pressure of its own unresolved tensions. If you found this breakdown gripping and eye-opening, make sure to hit the like button and share your thoughts below. Do you think the WNBA and its players can find a way forward? Is leadership doing enough to protect the league's future? And what would a work stoppage mean for the momentum women's basketball has finally gained? Join the conversation in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into the biggest stories shaping the world of sports.